All right, Pastor Ben, you are good to go in 30 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello there, good evening, everybody from wherever you're joining us from, and a warm welcome to the Yasha platform. Welcome to the Tuesday Enlight Table Talk. These table talks come your way every Tuesday, where we bring various discussions with experts in the industry to discuss various subjects that pertain to what Yasha believes is a mandate that is been set up for, which is to empower young people to lead, inspire, and thrive. And today we're very excited to come back to you with another very exciting topic of discussion that we believe is going to enrich your understanding, enrich your capacity to become the leader for the next generation that is equipped and empowered to lead, inspire, and thrive. I am your host. My name is Benjamin Mwape. Very excited about the guests that we have this evening, and I'll be introducing them very shortly. But before we go into that, I want to remind you that the conversations on Yasha are so great that you don't want to have them alone. And remember, our culture is to ensure that anybody you believe needs to be part of these conversations must be logged in. So share the Zoom link, tag somebody on the Facebook page, and let them know that they can be part of the conversation. You see, growth is important and better when you're growing together with the people around you. It always becomes challenging when you're growing and the people around you are growing with you. It becomes difficult to have certain conversations together. So as far as your desire for growth is demonstrated by you being on this platform tonight, you need to make sure that the people that matter in your life are also connected, logged in, and are part of these conversations that we are having. And so once again, warm welcome, and very excited about what we will be going into tonight. Also very important for me to remind you as well that these conversations are meant to be interactive. We have some of our participants or listeners and viewers joining us right within the Zoom platform. And so this is like our in-house audience, and you are welcome, and you will be having a chance to participate by asking questions and making a comment. But for those of you that are watching and joining us on Facebook Live, you too can participate. Make sure that you're commenting and asking your questions. Later on in the course of the discussion, we will be able to take a pause and respond to some of those questions. They could be comments. They don't always have to be questions. They could be comments, and we will be able to take those. Remember, this is meant to be a conversation, and we're all about Yasha. Yashering means lighting up the things that really need to be put on the spotlight to ensure that they get the attention that they deserve, in as far as bringing them to the fore, discussing them, and ensuring that they are understood from the right perspective. Tonight, we will be talking about youth leadership and the era of fake news and misinformation. Youth leadership in the era of fake news and misinformation. As you would imagine, we are living in a very dynamic generation, in a very dynamic time and age, where so many things have changed in as far as our access to information is concerned. And we really want to go into the depth of having this conversation because it matters a lot, particularly for the next generation of leaders. I believe that correct information transforms and wrong information deforms. And we have had a lot of people who've shipwrecked their destinies, who've shipwrecked the destinies of society, of nations, simply because they made decisions as leaders on the basis of wrong information, on the basis of misinformation. And so that is how critical this subject is, that there are so many people that would have been in a better place than they are today. But by reason of them having been exposed to wrong information or access wrong information, their life, their future was shipwrecked on that basis. The opposite is equally true. And we believe, particularly from Yasha's perspective, where we empower young people to thrive, that one of the ways you can thrive is by having access to correct information, having access to the right information. And this is a discussion that is particularly key for us, because we believe that as the next generation of leaders is emerging, they need to understand the dynamics as they regard access to information and ensure that they're safeguarded from some of the emerging issues that are coming up in form of misinformation and fake news. My guests tonight are two very dynamic thought leaders on the subject matter that we'll be dealing with. And I'm very excited to introduce them because in their own right, they're already doing quite a lot of great work to try and deal with this subject, but also transform and make a difference in the space of empowering the next generation of leaders, and as far as having access to information, correct information in particular, is concerned. So first of all, we're joined by Pennifer Sikainda Yurenda, who is the founder and chairperson of Uplift Media. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that exciting work on at Uplift Media. But Pennifer, good evening and welcome to the Yasha Enlight Table Talk.
Good evening, Benjamin, and good evening.
Fantastic. So glad you could join us. And we're looking forward to a great conversation with you.
Well, thanks for having me. It's an honor, and I'm looking forward to sharing this platform, of course, with Curtis and everybody else who will join us. Fantastic.
Talking about Curtis, he is the next panelist that we have this evening. Curtis Lloyd is another dynamic leader who is very difficult to introduce. I always say that because there's so many facets to him. But simply put, he is the founder of Possibility Practitioners. Curtis, good evening and welcome to Yasha Enlight Table Talk this evening.
Good evening, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm really honored to have been considered to look at this subject broadly with the expert that we have on the panel in the name of Pennifer. So I'm really excited, and I'm hoping to learn even as we interact.
Fantastic. Whilst I'm with you, Curtis, tell me more about Possibility Practitioners. What an intriguing and interesting name.
Awesome. So a few years ago, I got to interact with certain information that changed the way I thought, changed my perspective towards life. And it was a situation where I got to see a few people that were changing their world. And I'm talking about the Emirates of Dubai. And so when I got to see what they were looking at, it dawned on me that these guys are possibility practitioners. So in essence, they had transformed the desert that was in Dubai to become the masterpiece that it is today. And so in getting to appreciate the context in which they got that done, we contextualized everything and believed that if they could do it, we can do it. And so Possibility Practitioners is all about those people that can believe and insist that whatever is possible must happen. And in summary, people get to ask me, like, why possibility? So I get to define possibility rather from one dimension. So I don't look at it just from the aspect of chance. I look at it from the perspective that if something can happen, then we should insist that it should happen. So we gray out the possibility of it not happening. So we insist that the possibility of something happening must always side on the part where it should of necessity come to pass. So basically that's what Possibility Practitioners is all about. And so we begin to localize the thoughts and practicate them from where we are as individuals and as a country, and hoping that we can go to the next new normal.
Wow. So Possibility Practitioners is actually a product of having encountered the right information.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I can imagine that before you encountered that information, the only practitioners you knew were health practitioners, legal practitioners. Then it turns out they can actually be possibility practitioners.
Indeed, indeed. And basically that was it. I think it was a dawn of something new. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great. Very interesting to hear that how that was birthed, and we're going to talk further around that later on. Pennifer, you're doing some amazing work, and a lot of it excitingly relates to our subject of discussion. I have followed a little bit of your work on Uplift Media. Would you like to tell us more about it?
Well, firstly, Uplift Media is a mentorship organization which is biased towards media mentorship, hence the name. The way it was established was basically because I used to get a lot of people asking me to mentor their children. They'll tell me, my daughter wants to be like you, they want to be a journalist, and there would be so many requests. I could not really manage to provide the one-on-one service.
Mm,
Thankfully, with a couple of colleagues who bought into the concept, I shared the idea of setting up a media mentorship organization. What inspired that is also because there are a lot of people who are doing entrepreneurship training. If you want to be a business person, it's very easy for you to find people who can help you.
mhm,
But if you want to be a media practitioner, who's going to help you?
mm,
We thought we could fill that gap by setting up Uplift Media as a platform to provide media mentorship services for young people who want to take up various media careers. So it's not really biased towards journalism, but it's across the industry, whether you want to be a photographer, you want to be a graphics artist, whichever
mm,
dimension. So long we can help you to shape that dream, and within the lines of what Curtis said, it's possible for you to thrive in the media space, either as an individual entrepreneur in that space or to work for somebody, but for you to have that skill and understand and prepare yourself adequately by going through the hands of people who've gone ahead. We stand by the tagline, uplifted to uplift, which is
mm.
basically inspired by the understanding that there's nothing too little to be shared. So, whatever
Wow.
you've achieved, whether you are 1 year ahead of me in your school or in whatever you're doing, you are uplifted enough to share something. So, everyone who goes through our hands has been inspired to inspire somebody else, regardless of how little would have shared with them. So, that's really the background behind the Uplift Media. It's a mentorship organization biased towards media.
Amazing. Uplifted to uplift. Anytime I hear people talk about mentorship and actually demonstrate their commitment and passion to invest in mentorship, I get very excited because more than ever before, our generation does need a lot of investment through mentorship. So well done for having taken that route in ensuring that as part of your upliftment, others are also uplifted.
Thank you. And I'm
So,
glad
ladies
to
and
share the
gentlemen,
story with you. Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen, you are on the Yasha Enlight Table Talk tonight, and we're talking about youth leadership in the era of fake news and misinformation. I am joined by Curtis Lloyd, who is the founder of Possibility Practitioners, as well as Pennifer Sekainda Nyurenda, who is the founder and chairperson of Uplift Media, and we'll be delving into the details of this discussion. You too will have an opportunity to interact, participate, share your comments, your views on what our panel will be discussing tonight. And also, if you want to ask a question, you can post it on our Facebook page, you can post it in the Zoom chat, and the panel will be able to respond. So a warm welcome once again to all of you. Right, let's go into the details of this discussion. And I want us to start off by taking a step back and looking at how access to information has evolved over the past decades. We have seen a significant shift in as far as people's access to information is concerned. So much has shifted, so many new dynamics have come up, and we could go into the details of those, but we know that one of the key drivers to that is technology. But I want to hear from both of you in terms of, with this shift that has happened, what is the good and the bad in it? What is it that we must really be paying attention in terms of what are the pros and cons of this shift in as far as access to information is concerned? Let me start with you, Pennifer.
Well, I think what is good is that you've started with the aspect of technology having driven the change in how we access information. One of the things that we can remember very clearly is that in the olden days, people would gather around a radio set because it's the only access they have to information for a particular period of time. But the gap has been bridged by technology, which has made access to information, of course, basically as easy as you just tapping your phone, and you can easily get news or whatever is going on around you. It's a good thing in the sense that access has been made easier. But the reason why we're having this discussion tonight is because the access itself has led to certain people taking advantage of this ready availability of information to abuse it, to abuse the platforms that we have. So social media has come in to bridge that gap. It's one of the platforms that we have that we can easily talk about and say we can easily access information. Gone are the days when you'd have to wait for a certain period of the day for you to watch the main evening news, or just for you to know what's going on. But now you can get news instantly. You have live feeds across different platforms. That in itself speaks to accessibility of information. But I believe as we keep going in the discussion, we'll be talking about why the abuse of these platforms is making our lives quite difficult. The negative effects of misinformation, it is something that perhaps as we keep talking, we'll be able to deduce and see the need for people to get the right information. It's not just about accessing information, but it has to be right information. I think it's a good thing that as it stands, we can talk about how there are enough platforms for us to access information. The issues will be one, who is providing the right information.
Awesome. So it's great that we have various options of access to information, but the question is who is providing the information, and we'll be coming back to that. Curtis Lloyd, would you want to add your perspective in terms of what is the good and the bad within the shift in as far as access to information is concerned?
Yeah, just like Pennifer has alluded, I think we've gotten to a time where we are closely getting to that stage where everybody can be informed at the same time. I think a few years ago, other than that aspect of sitting by the radio to listen to what is happening, or probably a relative sending through a message via radio, we also had the option of somebody to literally travel from wherever they are to just get that information to you in a different town. So by the time they are reaching you, probably that piece of information would have become obsolete. It could have been a sick relative that could have needed urgent help. It could have been need for maybe agricultural inputs that could have run out. Maybe people in the village are starving. By the time that information is getting to you, things could have gotten worse. But where we are currently, I think we are at a place where it's easy to actually communicate and everybody is aware almost at the same time. The challenge that we may be facing, diverse challenges that we'll be facing, obviously, one of them being that we are unable to validate information because everybody, depending on which platform they stand, has coronated themselves as a source of information. And depending as well with the crowds or the masses that follow them, they have become a voice. And the challenge that comes with is whatever they say might never be tested against facts. So it's easy to mislead in that regard because we cannot regulate that space. So it's not a space that can be regulated. And unfortunately, I know that those are part of the battles that probably the government could be facing right now in terms of how can they get on ground to regulate some of these like online media platforms. But that is a separate discussion aside the integrity of the information itself, which can only, in terms of the good and the bad, I think that is the adverse side of that, as well as, of course, we are unable to control all the information that might come or that might be reaching, for example, our kids. So they will have access to whatever information they want to have access to. So there's absolutely no control. In as much as on their gadget, you might want to limit, you don't know which other gadget they've got access to. So those are the challenges that will come in with information and whatever they might be subjected to. But as it were, I think it's a case of what can be done. Is there anything that we can put in place? Is there hope? Or maybe this is a lost battle altogether? So basically, those are my thoughts around it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for adding your thoughts to that. Listening to both of you speak about this particular subject makes me realize how much we need to be aware that the world is basically driven by agendas. There are different agendas that are constantly put in our face. And some of the things that we see on the surface has got depth behind it in terms of what's driving it, what's fueling it, as it were. And I think Pennifer did allude to the fact that having access to information from various platforms is not an issue, or is not the problem itself, but it is who is providing that information. And of course, Curtis, you bring in the aspect of integrity, which is very important. And all these things are important to bring to this discussion, because it is not always easy to know the motive behind the information. It is not always easy to know the agenda behind the information that is being provided. And so having this conversation becomes critical, because at some point we will be going into some of those details to look at how can we see through the lines, how can we see through, the surface, beyond the surface value of the information that we are accessing from various platforms. So thank you for highlighting that and setting the scene for that. But I'm thinking about somebody out there that is a little bit confused and not sure what constitutes fake news, what constitutes misinformation. The words sound straightforward, but I believe they need to be contextualized and put into a particular context of what is fake news and what is misinformation. And I'd like to turn back to Pennifer to just help us understand what is really fake news and what is misinformation in the context of this discussion and broadly speaking.
All right. Okay, so we start with fake news. Fake news, in simple terms, would just be news that is not true. It's not what it is. And for misinformation, I would describe it as news or information that has been twisted for easy understanding. This is where there is sometimes an element of truth, but it is not entirely true. That's how I categorize the two, because you have people who generate fake stories that they have no link to anything whatsoever. It's probably something imaginary or something that is deliberately made as propaganda to drive a certain agenda. And misinformation is where you deliberately twist facts so that you can, again, drive some agenda at the end of the day, because why would you want to intentionally misinform? I believe there's always a motive to either of the two situations.
Rightly so, Pennifer, there is always a motive to both of those situations, whether it's completely untrue information or altered information that has been twisted. Curtis, what do you think is fueling the rise in terms of misinformation and fake news out there? What could be some of the drivers?
I think critical is the disseminator of that information. We can clearly deduce the agenda depending on the source of that information. I think about a few years ago, I was at the magistrate's court. I remember as I was walking out, I bumped into a certain political figure whose name I won't mention. And then, of course, he came with a fraternity of what we tend to call cadres. They were around him, mobbing him, excited that he's at the courts. And then while he was there, another political figure from a different political party walked out of the courts and went into the car. And then the cadres who were with this political player were excited with their political figure. And so there was some jubilations, and all the other political figure got into their vehicle and drove off. And then this one who was with their the fraternity of cadres walked into their vehicle while he was being mobbed, and they were excited being around him. And then what really shocked me was that the next day I checked through the papers, I see a headline that is suggesting that cadres harassed a particular political figure. And so it was so alarming to an extent that they even had to put some specifics that were done, like, you know, this person was pushed around and all those things. And then I sat and I was like, but then what's the purpose of this information? And now this is a gazetted paper, and then they are sending forth that information that is far from truth. And then you can imagine it's going across the country, and then because they've got also some online face, it's actually being globally interpreted. So you look at that, and from the leader's perspective, I think it's a question of selfish gain, where you want to suggest that this other person is facing, or probably you want to give certain information about a particular figure or about a certain environment, just so that you can position yourself for a takeover. It could be different. It could be a place of getting advantage or maybe having monetary gain out of it, but it's always out of selfish ambitions, regardless of which side of the divide one is coming from. So that is usually the motive, really.
Wow, interesting to hear that you actually had a first-hand experience of what was true and then encountered an alteration, like Pennifer was saying, or a twisted vision of the truth.
Version of the facts,
And that's very unfortunate, especially when you talk about the fact that the paper or the media outlet that was put out is one that is gazetted and recognized as a media, and all of that comes into the aspect of integrity that we had already sort of touched on already. Pennifer, what are your thoughts around what's driving this rise in misinformation and fake news, essentially?
Well, I'll basically add and agree entirely with what Curtis has said. There's always an agenda to it. People want to be recognized as the ones who are either doing something more significant than another person, or just to make the other person look bad. It's happening not just in the political space, but you see such kind of things going on even when it comes to the business circles and even amongst individuals. You may have encountered it at a personal level, where you probably are being queried on an issue and you're probably being asked, is this true? I heard that you are probably up to something. And when you cross check, you find that information is coming from cheap gossip, for lack of a better description. These are things that seem to be growing from poor or bad cultures that we live with in our communities, and now going to national and to another extent a global perspective. You hear countries or international organizations trying to always put up campaigns against people that have misinformed their audiences, or because somebody somewhere decided to deliberately, twist information about them. So it's about, I think it starts from the perspective of who is driving that information, who is bringing that information out, and what is their motive. The unfortunate scenario is that in our country, it seems to be a growing problem. In the olden days, of the last couple of years, post 2010, you would have said maybe the figures were a little bit less. But now we've reached a stage where even government officials have encountered public, they've had to issue statements to counter maybe information that is on social media, as a result of someone even going to the point of picking an official government letterhead and creating a story as though it's coming from a place like State House or a government department like a ministry. The question is, why go to all that trouble? There must be a deliberate agenda being set to either, make other people look bad, or just deliberately cause confusion. But what do they gain at the end of the day is what always bothers my mind. Why are we not looking at the greater good? Because if you're going to degenerate society into chaos, what are you going to achieve at the end of the day? That's something that, honestly speaking, really just puts me off when it comes to issues of fake news.
I'm quite concerned listening to what you just said, Pennifer, and building on from Curtis's earlier comments around this, because then one of the key things that is obviously established in this conversation is that there are various agendas behind the fueling of these fake news and misinformation. But then the unfortunate part of it is that there are a lot of people that are innocently or vulnerable and consuming this news. Majority of them, unfortunately, are young people, the next generation of leaders, the youth that are supposed to be making informed decisions about their own destiny and the destinies of the nation. And I'm thinking that when we talk about these agendas and how rife they are, listening to both your explanations, it occurs to me that you probably could have people living their entire life on somebody's wrong agenda, basically, uh, depending on where they're accessing information, depending on what the source of information is that is informing their life, that is informing their decisions or their understanding of life and shaping their perspective. We probably have so many people that are basically living their day-to-day life driven by somebody's agenda, who's done that through fake news, through misinformation. I would like to hear from both of you in terms of how much impact, and perhaps let me put it this way, how much damage, has fake news sort of caused, and misinformation in as far as society is concerned, in as far as people are concerned. Let's go to the depth of understanding how much damage has been done or is being done. Either of you could start and take it up.
All right, thanks. I think when we talk about fake news as well as misinformation, basically, I would liken it to a patient going to see a doctor, and then the feedback, or the doctor makes a decision based on the information that the patient will give the doctor. And so when you visit that specific medical practitioner, obviously your conversation will border on what challenges you are facing. And so if you've got a pain, for example, in your tummy, and then the doctor begins to interrogate you, to probe, to find out exactly what the challenge is, and then in all your discourse, you suggest that the pain is actually in the head. The challenge with that is that at the end of the day, you will get a wrong diagnosis, because you will be treated based on the information that you've given to that medical practitioner, and not the reality of the pain that you're actually going through. And so that in itself will tell you the volume of damage that the country may be subjected to, because it's in different folds. I'll give you an example. What we get to see if, say, a head of state is visiting a particular place, and all the kind of works that get to be done within that short space of time, because you know that the head of state must not see the dead that is in this hospital. So you do the cleanups. The head of state must not see that there are potholes on this particular road. So you patch them up. And so you begin to do the quick fixes to things that ordinarily the president or a decision maker would have seen. But then you do a quick fix because in your eyes, you feel if the president sees this, it will be an embarrassment on my part. But what you've ended up doing is that you've actually procrastinated the decision that could have impacted society at that particular time. So you've sent it to a further date, and that gets to impact decision making, policy making, and then you get to accuse decision makers in some cases, because you'd wonder why a particular locality is obviously not taken care of, but it's based on the information that we get to provide. It could be in disguise, or probably the spoken word that gets to land on the ears of these decision makers. So in a society like our, information that matters, we need to validate as well, and we need to be very, very careful not to only subject our society to what seems to be appealing, but to give facts that can be attended to. Otherwise, we will have an issue in the tummy and then get treated to something that is in the head, and we eventually end up with wrong diagnosis, and well, it will be a casualty at the end of the day. So yeah, that is one of the challenges that I can allude to, really.
Wow. What an interesting illustration there on wrong diagnosis. And I like the case in point, very practical about how sometimes people literally sugarcoat or cover up what leaders and decision makers are supposed to be seeing, and using that information to make the right decisions. Pennifer, your thoughts on this?
Well, I think my addition would be that we find ourselves in a place where we are now raising a very judgmental society. We have people who, to a great extent, now have to depend on what somebody else has said to drive their perspective of things. It bothers me that there are young people or people who consume news or other pieces of information that they have to depend on hearing what a certain leader would have said for them to believe whether that information is true. And what makes the situation worse is that none of, or very few, let me not say none, but very few people have the interest to verify information, which of course speaks again to what Curtis has said in as far as misdiagnosis. It's something that as a society we need to be worried about. Whereas we have young people who are going through the academic space, they're learning, getting degrees and all these things, but they don't have the time to invest in knowing what is right around them. And it's also about uh, getting back to the judgmental perspective I was talking about. It's a worrisome sight in the sense that we are going to raise a generation that will not be able to stand on its own. It will depend on other people to make those judgments for them, which is not good for us. And it's not just about the Zambian perspective. I'm even talking about it or looking at it from the international perspective. If we hear what continental leaders are saying, perhaps at the platform like the AU or the G7, if we hear what they're saying about us, even as a continent, and we ride with that information, we'll probably think we cannot get anywhere as a people, as individuals. Yeah, and that's something that we cannot rely on. You and I know that Zambia or Africa is able to do a lot more. But the world out there, if you're going to watch any international news media, you probably be thinking they're talking about another continent. What is driving that? It's definitely an agenda that is being fed to our people. We talk about issues of homosexuality, for instance. These are things which, if we speak as individuals or as a country, these are things that we are not very comfortable about. But because somebody has started the conversation elsewhere and they're throwing this information constantly in your face through music, through movies, you get to a point of accepting that you're actually in the right space, or if you are told you encounter certain feelings, then you're okay because you've been told that it is okay. What makes that happen is there are people who are driving an agenda and they're throwing it in your space so that you can agree with their position. Unfortunately, what that does is that it's ruining our core belief system as a people. And we have a generation that is now, to some extent, confused. And I feel sorry that we are like the generation that is in between the older and the younger. We're able to read between the two influences. But the ones who are coming after us don't have that privilege. And that's where a conversation like this is very important. What role are we playing to help protect what is coming ahead? How do we help young people to know where this country is coming from, for them to understand that there are certain things that we've held on to religiously for the purpose of maintaining our identity as a people? We have to guard jealously the things that hold us as a people together, for us to avoid any external influences that would injure the future that we project for our country.
Wow, so many things you've said, Pennifer, have really hit home in a lot of ways, and I think they're deep food for thought, essentially, for all of us to be able to ask ourselves, how much are we questioning what is driving our belief systems, what is driving our perspective on things? Because sometimes we casually, just adopt certain things because they've constantly been put in our face, or we've constantly been exposed to them without really questioning who is behind it, why has this all of a sudden become very important. And it's interesting actually when you talk about those things, because sometimes what is even interesting is that you see a shift in certain things. Today, for example, they will tell you this thing is wrong. A few years down the line, you begin to hear a different narrative altogether. No, actually, this is good for your health. And, the narrative changes. And it probably is not that it was bad and then it all of a sudden converted to become good. It's just that somebody else with a louder voice or somebody else is holding the mic and speaking more loudly than the person that was speaking initially. And so that has changed the way information is being perceived. I want us to go into a couple of more discussions around prevention and how young people can begin to safeguard themselves. But I really want to remind our viewers on Facebook that you can make your voice heard, post your comments on the Facebook Live page if you're watching this right now. Ask a question if you can, and the panel will be able to respond to you. I've noticed there are a couple of comments in the chat box on the Zoom platform. Will be coming to those as well. So this is a space for interaction. Anybody that wants to pose a question to our great panel this evening, please do post it on the Facebook page or in the Zoom platform, and we will be able to take your questions. We'll also be allowing people that are on the Zoom platform to unmute their mics and ask questions if they want to. But before we go into that, let's talk a little bit more about one of the areas that Yasha is very passionate about, which is young people. And this is all about young people, basically. How can they begin to safeguard themselves from all of this chaos that we're understanding from what you've highlighted and what you've shared right now? What are the practical ways that young people can begin to protect themselves and ensure that they safeguard their space and question some of the access points for the information that is coming their way? Let me go back to you, Penny, and start with you, and then we'll go to Curtis.
Okay, I think one of the places one of the areas we should start from is, who are you as an individual? What do you stand for? I would also like to throw in the patriotism card, if possible. Do you know who a Zambian is, or do you know what it means to be called a Zambian? Are you patriotic enough to buy any story that you hear about your country, whether you are living in Zambia or you're actually in the diaspora? If patriotism can be one of the areas we can start from, we'll be looking at people who love their country enough to protect it from anything that is not good. And you would use that as well as a mechanism to check any information that you get and to also generate correct information. I would love to see a scenario where the young people that are always active on social media are the ones championing the good that is in this country. Let's take, for instance, the aspect of tourism. An area I like to take an interest in, because Zambia is a beautiful country. When you have the privilege of seeing different places outside Lusaka and even within Lusaka, let me not take anything away from Lusaka, but generally when you look at Zambia, we have a beautiful country. But how many of us have taken the interest of exposing that good aspect of Zambia to the rest of the world and the people around us? Perhaps are very few, and we leave certain responsibilities to the government because we think it's the job of the Zambia Tourism Agency, or it's the job of tourism, or even the president. But it's a responsibility that we have, and young people have to take that interest seriously. We have the responsibility collectively to help this country change, so that we can project it the right way. And since we're trying to talk so much about tools that we can use to bring about social change among the young people, and to make information, to get the right information across, I would like to encourage young people to also verify. A basic issue like verification would help you change your mindset about something that you come across. It's not everything that you read online that is gospel truth. There are certain platforms that you can rely on as for verification. If I'm going to read something on a certain blog, there are other tools which you can use to go and check that this information has actually been published by a more reputable institution. It must be correct. And there are certain stories which, from a journalistic perspective, you can tell that this story doesn't have any facts in it. You are able to tell there's nothing that is building in it by virtue of you going through how it has been presented. But it's, of course, from a very professional perspective. On a simpler scale, it's more about making the effort of just verifying. As simple as that. Verify the stories that you come across, and you'll be able to tell if those things, well, those stories are trying to build or to destroy the society that we should all cherish. We only have one Zambia after all.
Okay, I think quite interesting. And just to add on, if we talk about a country, for example, and where we are as a people, one of my convictions is that, you see, the quality of questions that the citizens ask are responsible for where we are as a people. And so it stems from there. And we are Zambia. The Zambia that we are today, there's never been a better time than now for the young people to position themselves for correct information. I was having a conversation with some people that we are saying for our political space, for example, to suggest that, look, but then how come political players just sing songs at rallies? And then I told them the reason they do so is because we, the young people, love the songs. And so if we get ourselves to a place where our posture suggests that we need content beyond the songs that we go to listen to, because there's a platform on which we can listen to those songs, we'll begin to receive content that is specific to the agenda that we are trying to drive as a people. And so it's critical that young people begin to position themselves for that, because there's no way something will be thrown at us unless we've positioned ourselves to be recipients of that thing. And so young people need to be critical. We need to ask the correct questions. We need to stand on the podium of truth. We should not entertain slander or anything in that regard. We only have this country. And a few days ago, I was chatting with some colleagues, and I was saying we are at a place, especially we as Zambians, I was saying we are at a place where we are about to distort history. I said that to mean that, look, I even gave a funny example that there was something that was trending a few months or so ago about some memes where people were saying, oh, this is the names I've forgotten, but I would say, like, this is Mutale, the first person to have ever received transport money and never traveled. And so those were popular memes. They were very funny memes, and I was actually tempted to post. But when I sat and thought through them, especially that most of them that were being posted did not suggest that they were memes, I began to share with my friends that, you see, in the next few years, this is information that the generations that are coming after us will interact with. So we are basically building a history, and which reservoir of data are people going to tap from? It's from Facebook. What kind of content have we been posting on Facebook? It is those memes. Did we classify that they were actually memes? It might appear small, but then 30 years, 40, 50 years from now, somebody will tap into that reservoir to document our history. There's a book that I got a few years ago that talks about our history in perspective from the years before Christ up to where we are, and how that they were collecting information based on the few details that were left by those individuals that lived way in that time, from the Stone Age era, the kind of, Stone Age art, and how that information has helped us document our history. And then I look at where we are now, and the privilege we have with the information that we have at the disposal, and yet slowly we are distorting the kind of history through slander and opinionated positions. We are trying to probably bring down certain individuals, or probably we are not as patriotic, like Pennifer has said, to our country. And so we don't care whether that injures our country or not. And so we just throw it out there. But in the next few years, whatever we post on Facebook collectively will be used by somebody without it being validated. as what will constitute our history. So I say again, without apology, that if we continue on this path, we are in essence distorting the history that's taken years to be built to where it is today. So I think that is my thought around that.
Awesome. It looks like I got cut off for a bit there, but just catching up with the conversation and hearing it, perhaps I was misinformed about how to do technical things on my laptop. But I had to ask someone to give me the right information. But Curtis, you raise a very important aspect there about how some of the things that are happening now have got a lot of great implications in posterity. And there probably will be no one to explain that this was just a joke. You know, I'll post something
Absolutely.
today, and my child's child will be saying this was grandpa's profile. And they'll literally go there and believe everything their ancestors said.
Absolutely. And we won't be there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we won't be there
Great.
to justify it.
Justin Bulaya asks a question, a very pertinent question. He's saying this is the generation that can correct this. This is the generation that can change this news. But how do I begin to do this without being insulted or cursed? So it looks like Justin is interested in making a difference, but he's worried that if he did dare go into that space, he might be insulted. He might get a backlash. And that's a very important question, because like we're saying, young people need to begin to safeguard themselves. But another level to that is young people should begin to take a proactive role to make a difference and correct this. So that's very important question, Justin. Thank you so much for that. What are your thoughts, both in terms of how you could advise Justin to step out and make a difference without feeling afraid that he'll be insulted if he did?
Well, from my perspective, what is important for Justin and everybody, or all of us, is firstly to do the right thing. What do you want to get at the end of the day? Earlier on, we're talking about agenda setting. The people who generate fake news have an agenda. But if you want to provide correct news, that is your agenda, that's your motivation. Your inspiration is to be the one who's making a difference in our society. So regardless of what people will say, it's better to do the right thing. I have a philosophy that in heaven, when it's time for on Judgment Day, no one will justify that I did a wrong thing because my friend did it. We're all answerable for our own actions. So do the right thing, and you won't have any regrets. You won't owe anyone an explanation, because you know that you're doing what is expected of you. So that's what I would encourage Justin to do. Just do the right thing.
Right, Curtis?
Absolutely. The other thing that I actually advocate for so much, and I'm passionate about, is we also need to document our history. It's quite unfortunate that when it comes to information pertaining, for example, the transition, I challenge even scholars that when we talk about independence, for example, the thoughts that come into our minds are the Kaundas of this world, the Kapwepwes of this world. Yes, they have that space, the freedom fighters, they went ahead of us. But can you imagine how, because we're dealing with information right now, can you imagine how complicated the world they lived in was? Because there were no telephone calls by then. I mean, there were no telephones by then for you to call people and advise them of what is obtaining in Lusaka, somebody who is in Lundazo or Chadiza, somebody who is in Shangombo, Lumwezi and all those spaces. How did they get to a point where they all knew that the agenda currently is that we are fighting independence, and that information would permeate all the boundaries and still reach all those places far-fetched within a short space of time? So there are certain details that we did not document in the history, because there are things like songs that were sung back then to communicate the agenda of the time. And those songs were sung in such a way that the white man who was the oppressor then did not understand what was obtaining, in as much as he danced to the same songs, but they were communicating what we were about to do as a people. But then we've reached a point where even those songs, we cannot find them. Who knows the songs? Where are they? And you know, when all those Kapwepwe's, kaundas of were meeting to have all those conventions, strategic meetings in specific homes, what was the role of women that are not women, rather, who are not mentioned in the books of history? So the question is, how can we broaden this history so that even as we delve into it, it can be qualified? And so the role of us as young people, because we are living in the now, let us write the story that relates to the now. Let's document it in such a way that a few years from now, somebody will look at the stories that I've said concerning our country, concerning what we are going through as a phase, for example, the now phase. Somebody should be able to go into that and they can test those facts. And then we create a bureau where that information can easily be accessed. I know we've got institutions that can actually help in that regard, because we can have that information stored for posterity's sake. Because unless we document our history, I always say so, that we'll have outsiders narrate our story, but they'll be biased because they'll narrate it from their point of interest. So we have a huge responsibility to document our history, because there's no other way we'll relate to it unless somebody has written about it. The way we talk about everything that has happened in the past, for example, we talk about history in different contexts. We are able to confidently do so because somebody was bold enough to document it. And so my call really is, whatever we can, let's make popular the documentation of our history.
Awesome. I love the way you put it, that if we don't write our own story or our own history, somebody will write it for us and they'll write it from a very wrong perspective. And that's a very important aspect to reflect on, both at a personal level, but also corporately as a society or as a nation. We need to be able to think deeply about that, that for anything that you want to go out there as truth, be the one to say it. And I think Penny's statement earlier around just do the right thing is very important, because ultimately it is in doing the right thing, no matter how unpopular it is, as long as it is the right thing, then you're definitely on the right track. A couple of people that are expressing to us that they're following this conversation on Facebook. Thank you so much for joining. Definitely this conversation is very insightful for a number of them. Kennedy, I see you. Thank you for letting us know where you're watching from. Otavia there, following and watching. And it's great to know that people are following the conversation and finding it very useful. But I want to quickly just allow Bevis, who is joining us on the Zoom platform, to just come in and make a comment or ask a question. Bevis, you can unmute and just go ahead with your contribution.
Thank you very much. Exciting conversation indeed, and very inspiring thoughts there. I just wanted to bring home one point which Lloyd has already started to hit on around testing information. One of the key solutions to managing misinformation is really testing the information that you receive before you make any decisions. I'm an M&E expert, and one of the core terms we like to use is triangulation. So when you get information about anything, say COVID now, everybody's talking about the vaccine. There's a lot of stories about whether it is the right vaccine, is it the right way to do it. Do your best before you make any decision to test the facts that you are receiving, and try to test them from 3 different sources. So if you're a CNN media person, watch something from Al Jazeera and watch it from Russia TV. You will get very interesting perspectives, knowing that all the 3 players are speaking from various points of interest. If you are UPND and something is being discussed about your president, try and listen from it from different medias. Listen it from state media. Listen it from the UPND page. Check out what Mwebantu is saying. When you test things from different perspectives, you are most likely going to arrive at your own truth. And your own truth is even better than a wrong truth given to you, because you can own the consequences of that truth when you make the decision. So I would like to encourage the young people out there to be very careful and test every truth that comes. Try to, even the Bible says, in a matter of witnesses, in a matter is established. The last point I want to also make home is that be careful at spreading rumors. Misinformation is actually spread through rumors and gossip. We, the same people, are the ones that spread misinformation. So you hear something, you have not tested it yourself, and you are number one to post on Facebook and on social media. You are actually sponsoring misinformation and fake news yourself. So I would want to encourage us, test the truth, and only post a truth that you have tested, because you are fueling that misinformation if you are not testing it. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Bye.
Awesome. You really drive a lot of critical points home there. And I can imagine that there are probably a number of people listening in right now that are guilty sponsors of fake news, at least by that standard and criteria, because we've got this common habit of, you find something on a social media page, on WhatsApp group, you watch it, you read it, and you easily forward it. And what is amazing is some people do that, and I like that Bevis brings in the aspect of triangulation, or testing something across two, three different aspects. There are certain times when you even can tell that this news is nowhere else. You go to various news platforms, it's not there. You know, some of the most trusted places, you know that it's not there, but you still find people who just read it from one source, a friend, and immediately for them it's gospel truth, and they share it with somebody else. So Bevis, thank you so much for driving those points home around testing the sources of the news. And you remind me of the Bible scripture that says, test every spirit. I think from the spiritual perspective as well, we can use the same standard. And talking about that, one of the areas where there's been a lot of misinformation is actually in the area of religion, and so many mushrooming information. We could go into that, but probably let's reserve that for another day. But great conversation indeed, and so much to talk about. It's very clear at this point that we are enveloped in a lot of information as a people. The dynamics of how we access information has significantly changed and shifted. And with that shift, we must be able to shift the way we perceive it. We must be able to shift the way we consume it, and adopt methods that will help us safeguard truth in accessing that information. And we've been having this great conversation with Pennifer Skinder Nurenda and Curtis Lloyd, who've been very great at providing insights to us in as far as how we can change the narrative and begin to prevent the era of fake news and misinformation, particularly as it relates to young people and young leaders who are emerging and so bombarded with so many messages with which behind them are so many agendas, and sometimes young people are vulnerable and not able to sift through the information, not able to sift through some of the messages that they're getting access to know, is this truth? What is the agenda behind it? And so great conversation, but I want us to begin to wrap it up. And I'm going to turn back to both Pennifer and Curtis to just begin to share your closing remarks and last thoughts. And in doing so, your key message to the young people of this nation and beyond who are joining us on both Zoom and Facebook. What is your key message in terms of how do we take this forward? It is very clear that the consequences of fake news and misinformation are very grave, both at a personal level in terms of impacting the individuals, but also in terms of how much damage they can cause to society. So in your closing remarks, both Curtis and Pennifer, I would like you to just speak to the young people, particularly the young leaders, the emerging leaders, the ones that if we don't deal with these consequences, they'll be the ones leading when we are facing the challenges of what we would have ignored today. What is your last message to them? I'll start with you, Pennifer, and then end with Curtis.
Well, thank you very much, Benjamin. Drawing to a close, of course, firstly makes me appreciate the fact that this conversation was very important. And it's good to have such conversations as part of the solution to a big problem that is affecting not just our country, but the rest of the world. In closing, I'd like to encourage everyone who's joined into this conversation to, of course, do their part. We cannot change the story without being part of the people who are working the change that we want to see. As Uplift Media, it permit me to mention that we're actually taking a step in that direction by hosting one of our mentorship classes this very month, and we're addressing misinformation. And we hope to equip the people who will attend our session by giving them tools that they can use to also, in the words of Bevis, who submitted earlier, to test information. And there are tools that people can use, and those are the things that we should focus our attention on. How can I verify information, whether I'm in the media space myself or I'm actually just a consumer of information? How best can I do that? One of the other things I'd like to emphasize as we close from my point is that I would like to see a change among the young people in as far as the information that they put out there concerning their colleagues to start with, because these things start from a personal perspective. Are you going to be the one who's going to spread cheap gossip about your friend, or you're going to protect their reputation? The best way you can counter fake stories is by telling the truth. Sometimes we opt to keep quiet, thinking the story will die down at some point. After all, Zambians forget easily. But we have already learned that those things leave they leave a record. History will come and there'll be no record of correction. So somebody needs to play their corrective part in containing or dealing or countering. You know, I love football. So if you're gonna do a counter attack on any fake news, you would have made a difference in our society by giving the right information and helping to change. Anyone who's telling fake stories should know that somebody out there actually knows the truth. So let's play our part by doing the right thing and giving the right information, and of course making sure that we help to share the right information, as it were. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Benifa. Counterattack indeed. It is because obviously beyond just safeguarding ourselves, we have a responsibility to prevent this from causing further damage. And I like the way Benifa has put it. We must do something to counter what is currently prevailing. And perhaps a point of reflection for every young person that is listening right now. What can you do to counter fake news? What can you do to counter misinformation? It starts with, first of all, you taking the responsibility to spread the right information, disseminate the right news, ensure that it's tested, but also beyond that, begin to do more to counter what has already gone out there as fake news. Somebody makes a comment here, and I just want to quickly read it before I turn to Curtis. Says, thank you so much for the insights. Wish that this could reach the young leaders in the religion circle, because we are the culprits of spreading fake news because of the lack of research. Everything that we hear becomes gospel truth even before we test it. My advice is that we get involved in what is happening around us, wishing the nation within the nation at large. All right, thank you so much for those comments coming through via our Zoom chat. And one of the things that Benifa mentioned, which I was actually going to speak to, but gladly she pointed out, was the work that they're doing at Uplift Media and some of the mentorship that she did highlight earlier on, and the trainings that are coming up, the events that are coming up. You will do well to go to her page, Benifa Sikainda Nyirenda, and follow the work there on the Uplift Media work that they're doing, and find out how you can be part of that event. But also, one of the things I like is that they are giving out tools, because this is beyond just a conversation. And I like that we can take it to the next level of providing tools beyond just having the conversation. What are the tools that we need to equip the young people to be able to make a difference in the space of news dissemination and information dissemination? So if you're interested more in that, follow Benifa on social media platforms, and you can reach out to her to be able to get involved and tap into that great opportunity to be equipped, to be mentored, and to learn more about how you can make a difference. All right, I want to tend to Curtis Lloyd, but I think that we sort of have lost Curtis Lloyd. He just dropped off. And these are the challenges of technology sometimes. But so Curtis Lloyd did raise quite some important points that I want to just re-echo very quickly around the need for us to think very futuristic about the things that we're doing today and the implication that they have for the long haul and the future. And so sometimes as young people, we can innocently be doing things today. We can innocently be involved in certain conversations today, but do remember that they are shaping the future. And the next generation will rely on that information in as far as making decisions are concerned. Remember, information has so much power to shape lives, to change destinies, to alter destinies, and to shape the future and how people become. I wish you could have more time to go into further details on this subject. Clearly, it's a very pertinent subject that we need to continue discussing. But for now, we need to bring it to a close. And I want to take the opportunity to thank both Curtis Lloyd, who has just dropped off the call now, for the great insight that he brought to this discussion, and also Pennifer Sikainda Nyurenda, who was great to provide us a very sort of expert perspective, having coming from the media industry herself. Such rich information, such rich insights that you've provided to us, Pennifer, tonight. Thank you so much for being part of this discussion and conversation.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a privilege. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and we wish you well with the rest of the events and work that you're doing at Uplift Media. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to wish you a good night. This has been a great conversation, and remember, like we always say, the conversation doesn't end when the live stream goes off. You can continue making your voice heard on the Yasha platform by making your comments there, asking your questions, and some of our expert associates at Yasha will be coming through on our social media pages to respond to some of those questions. Until next Tuesday, at the same time, when we bring you another great discussion, I've been your host, Benjamin Mwape. Have a good night and keep Yashaing the nation. Thank you.